Excellent. Well, welcome everyone to our November CTA webinar. Today, I am joined by Rusty from SATA, and he will go over some of his experience working with Parks and Recs. And I will also be able to share some of my experience as well. And then as we go through this, this presentation, people that are on, you're welcome to also share some of your best practices or things that you encounter in the chat. And I also have a poll here too. Let me get this set up. There you go. I think on screen, you're gonna see a poll for Parks and Recs relationships. I was just kind of curious to see how many people out there that are attending, how many of you have relationships with your Parks and Recs and whether they are good, they're bad, non-existent, they're somewhat okay, and then we can chat more about it. I'll just give it a moment for that to, for people to fill out. As we are waiting just a little bit more, we have planned for one more webinar next month. I believe I'm going to have it be on the topics of volunteers. And if there's anyone that has good experience working with volunteers and would like to be a speaker, feel free to reach out to me. You will receive a Tennis Warehouse gift card in return. And also, for everyone that's on here live, you'll be put into a raffle for a $25 gift card from Tennis Warehouse. Tennis Warehouse has been our sponsor of this webinar series for this past year. We're very thankful for them to take care of that. And Rusty, you'll also get a gift card for participating this month. So
Thank you, appreciate it.
I'll talk to you about that later on. And then what else was I gonna say? Oh, I was also gonna mention just a, I guess a preview for next month's webinar. I certainly figure out a good date for it, but part of the reason why I want to talk about volunteers is because next year, one of my initiatives that I'm going to do is to create a brand new volunteer program within USTA Mid-Atlantic, where we can host a platform where people that are interested in volunteering across the section can join, they can sign up, and then they can also see opportunities for them to volunteer. So that would include local CTAs that have volunteer opportunities in the area. So I'll be reaching out to everyone once that gets set up. But I'm planning to have that launch early next year. So you'll hear more about it soon. All right, so I'm gonna see, I think, all right, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and end this poll for now. So it's good to hear that there's been some good, mostly positive, it seems like, and some somewhats. And at least it's good to hear that people have some form of relationship with Parks and Recs. I know that recently there's been some studies on where people play, especially in the Mid-Atlantic, and 50% of people that play tennis say they play it at the Parks and Rec sites. So it's very important to have those relationships to reach our audience. So I mentioned earlier on this in this chat, Rusty is here to go over some of the things that he has done with his Parks and Recs. He'll share some of his best practices and obstacles that we ran into, and then we can have some additional conversations on that after the presentation. So Rusty, I'm going to pass it on to you. Feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself and get it kicked off.
All right, thanks, Alex. First of all, thank you all for joining today. I'm very excited to be able to participate and contribute in any way. And hopefully there'll be a couple of nuggets in here that maybe you can walk away with and utilize in your tennis programs. I'll start off by saying, first of all, we're in Southern Virginia. In case you don't know exactly where we're located, it's Southwestern Virginia, an area called Danville. And it's traditionally been a little dead as far as tennis goes up until maybe the last 4 or 5 years. We had a thriving tennis community and scene, of course, in the 80s and 90s, as did many places. But it definitely had been on the decline in the 2000s. And I was lucky enough to kind of move back and meet some community members in this area that were really wanted to have tennis come back in a big way, and had just tons of help from some really solid people within Danville and some caring people outside of Danville that really wanted to see tennis happen in this area as well. So I had been coming primarily from a private club background. I was at La Jolla Beach and Tennis Club in San Diego before moving back to Virginia, which is where I grew up and close to home. So, I didn't really have much experience with a community tennis program, didn't really grow up under that type of program, and really just kind of learned all this on the fly probably about 5 years ago now. So I'll just start off with a little bit of background about this area. We'll also talk about, why SATA formed and who Southside Area Tennis Association is. And then I'll tell you a bit about how we focused on parks and recs, why we thought the parks and rec would be a good avenue for us. Just kind of tell you some of our successes, some of our failures, and kind of where we're at today. So maybe some of that can relate to where you all are doing your work at. So first of all, in 2016 is when we got started here in Danville. It's made up of about 40,000 residents. It's kind of generally a rural area with some decent sized cities, kind of, within 30, 45 miles of each other. But the greater area is about 40,000 residents, generally on the lower income side. When you look at median income, I believe Danville average is in the low 30s for median income. And our average age is about 58. So we're dealing with an older population, rural area, a little bit lower income. And also, as I started to spend more time here, came across a health and wellness report for the area. Kind of came across that as we were trying to start to grow tennis and applying for grants and things like that. And the health and wellness report for the city of Danville just basically educated me on and just highlighted some of the issues that they're dealing with in that area. And, we had a really high truancy rate, a really high dropout rate among high school students. Youth crime was also on the rise. And we just had a lot of single parent families in this area. And like I said, tennis had been on the decline for the last 15 to 20 years. But we did have some public tennis courts here. We have about 13 public tennis courts. And we have a small 6-court clay tennis court club. And, just to kind of give you a barometer for, tennis in this area, all the high school teams had pretty much been eliminated. And we barely had one girls team at a local high school out of the, 10 plus high schools that are within a 30-minute radius. So it had dropped off quite a bit. The courts were pretty dilapidated, and even the local tennis club and clubs within a 30-mile radius were really struggling for membership. Their numbers had dropped way off, and it was mainly an older generation that was kind of keeping the tennis clubs hanging on. Also, as I spent more time, back in this area, I was noticing that the city Parks and Rec, from my initial experiences, I didn't see them collaborating a lot with outside organizations or partnering very much. And there wasn't a ton of collaboration or partnership even within other city departments and county, parks and recs and things like that. So coming in and wanting to do a tennis program in the city, I was kind of finding, man, there's a lot of barriers here, and, resources are pretty minimal in this area. So, it's mainly attributed to that. I think the city wants something that's good for the community, but when resources are minimal, you definitely have to pick and choose what your priorities are. But there were some very bright spots about Danville and about the southwestern Virginia area. The city of Danville was taking some really solid steps forward and focusing on the youth. They really wanted to make an impact and kind of intervene and just really invest in the future generation. So that was something that was really, really key. And they, there's just a lot of progress within the downtown area. Just it's kind of a comeback city, and they're really just focusing on making it attractive and appealing, to people transplanting from other areas and coming to this region. So they're doing a lot of good things in that way. And a huge part of what also was going on good was actually someone not from Danville, but Linda Harrell of Quick Start of Central Virginia was just key in providing tennis equipment to all the local public schools in this area. And she had done a lot to just get tennis back on the map within PE classes and just equipping a lot of youth organizations with tennis equipment and the Quick Start equipment. There were also many hours on the phone where she was kind of laying out exactly what needs to happen if we want to tackle pioneering tennis in this area. So having a roadmap for how to do this was absolutely essential. And then having the schools with all the equipment was absolutely essential too. So there were some great things going on despite the demographics that you might be looking at. So well, let's see. I think I'm trying to share this slide with you guys, but I guess it's not one to do that for some reason. There we go. All right. So there was a good and bad. Sorry, I'm a little one slide behind, but I'll get you guys prepped for the next one. So this kind of takes us to Southside Area Tennis Association. I think once we kind of got the lay of the land and what we were looking at and building tennis in this area, that's when we decided to go ahead and become organized. And like I said, I was a part of the roadmap for building tennis in this organization was go ahead and start a 501c3 and start exploring what it meant to be a community tennis association. As I look back on, what is the common denominator, of our board members or the people who made impact, I think, what we see is really, among our key board members and among our coaches is that they really wanted to build community. I mean, they obviously have a love for tennis, but there was just a common thread in there for wanting to build community. And I think that's, one of the single most important characteristics that have allowed, the level of success that we're having right now in this area. So also, our mission, we wanted to grow tennis and make it accessible to all, so, that's kind of how I started out. I didn't know that I was going to get into, or that our organization was going to get into kind of building community. We really just wanted to grow the sport and bring it back and just make it accessible to everyone. But I think as we started doing that, we saw that, hey, tennis is great. People are really enjoying this, but there needs to be more, in order to compete with basketball and football and some of the more established sports, we needed to create a community, outside of just the sport of tennis that can really grab some of these kids and provide them a place, a safe place to spend their time, when on the tennis court and when off. So I think, making it a part of our mission to build community was also a key aspect, on top of growing the sport and just trying to break down that cost barrier. We also adopted kind of a high volume, low cost model. I think we realized early on that, in order to make tennis successful in an area where, it really didn't exist, we really needed to, keep the cost as low as possible and just offer as many affordable programs as we could. And we needed to get a lot of people playing, because there just weren't the numbers, in order to have a community when we first started. So I think we tried to adapt a model that would be conducive for that. And we were just willing to also just go anywhere that was open to tennis. We would put on programs. We would go to the local YMCA. We would go to, of course, public schools, private schools. We would go to housing authorities. I mean, we would set up wherever we could, and anywhere that had a blacktop or anywhere that had an activities room or wherever, we would make tennis happen. So I think being willing to do that, in the beginning is key. And this community has stuck with us because I think of those years where we just went anywhere and everywhere to kind of promote the sport. So and in doing that, we built a following, and I think obviously when you start to approach a Parks and Rec or a major institution and wanting to partner, having a following, is obviously, may seem obvious, but you have to do the work to build a following. And I think those first few years is where that really happened. So this kind of brings us to, why did our tennis association need Parks and Rec? Like I said, I was coming from more of a private club background. So, partnering with Parks and Rec wasn't really on my radar when I first moved back. But it became really apparent once I got to know the lay of the land in our area that Parks and Rec was going to be a great avenue for us. And honestly, that was not even my idea. Our president, Scott, was kind of guiding me in that direction. And I think Linda Harrell, as I mentioned before, is kind of guiding me in that direction, and kind of just getting my head wrapped around, a partnership with Parks and Rec and why that would be so beneficial, especially when you're trying to grow a grassroots tennis program. And it became a lot more apparent as I got into the trenches. So, we had tried to get this thing going at a private tennis club, and the private tennis club setting is great, and the members wanted to help, and the board want to see tennis grow. But when you actually talk about having high numbers of kids running around at a private club, and members who want their courts and want peace and quiet when they're trying to play tennis, you start to run into some friction and start to run into some issues. And especially if you're growing and you want to do more camps and more after school programs and more things like that, a private club, they obviously have to make their members happy first. So that's where the Parks and Rec public facilities start to come into play. It's just a little more available and accessible, and a little bit more freedom to do what you need to do in order to grow the sport. And that's what we found here. And it's been really great. I really don't think we hit our stride in growing tennis until we were on the public tennis courts. So we had a lot more visibility to the community, a lot more exposure, and we just had a lot more courts to work with that were available in order to put on successful programs. So that was really critical for us as well. We've also found that Parks and Rec, they're willing to help with costs associated with programs that they would typically provide if they were running a tennis program. Luckily, here Parks and Rec weren't providing any tennis programs whatsoever, so our association fully kind of adds value to them by offering that. And we found that they've been very helpful in paying for tennis balls, for paying for trophies, t-shirts, things like that can add up and can really help your bottom line when you're running leagues and tournaments and things of that nature. So I think a huge one that I'm just now starting to kind of hone in on and take advantage of is their Parks and Rec has a huge ability to market. They reach so many citizens that our website and our Facebook and social media and email just can't reach. I mean, I think Parks and Rec, when they send out their fall programming and spring programming out of the 40,000 residents, they are getting this programs out to over 10,000 of our citizens, and they just have a strong media presence, and having them market your programs and partnering with them can really just make a huge difference in your participation levels. So I think that's one of the biggest values there that I'm just starting to take advantage of. So also, if our association had a good end with the public schools before we had really worked with Parks and Rec in depth, but I am starting to reach more kids through the Parks and Recs because they have established after school programs, they have established summer camps, and they have established just youth programs where we can come in and offer tennis and just expose kids to that. And there's been a handful of good little tennis players that we've brought from a Parks and Rec program, out onto and into our leagues and into our camps. So it's also can provide nice access to youth that you may not otherwise be able to reach. So. I'll just talk about the first couple of years, the initial meetings, kind of how they went, and you can maybe learn from my mistakes, our mistakes on that, and maybe learn from some of our successes. When we decided to start to really get aggressive about growing tennis here, it was a pretty short fuse on it. We needed to see, or at least I personally, in order to earn a livelihood, I needed to see if tennis was going to fly and if there was going to be a major partner that would help stabilize the tennis program and initiate it in this area. And, my demands were pretty, needed to happen pretty quick. And, so we had focused on Parks and Rec. They were kind of our target, place to help stabilize a tennis director position that would, be able to keep someone here for the long haul to ensure that someone's driving this program and taking it where it needs to go. So we set our sights on Parks and Rec right from the beginning. We went and met with the director, Parks and Rec, brought a successful model of where a CTA has partnered with Parks and Rec and done big things. There's a city, Burlington, right down the road from us. It's a similar demographic, and we just constantly put this model in front of them and try to tell them, how big of a success that model has been, with the city adopting a tennis program and what could happen. So I think that's important to go there with a solid case study. And so after we had that model and after we got our meeting with Parks and Rec director, I just remember frankly and upfront just asking, hey, are you guys in a position to fund and support a tennis director? And, because I needed to know pretty early, and I found out the hard way. No way, shape, or form were they ready to go there at this moment. So that was a little disappointing because we kind of put a lot of effort and investment into getting our ducks in a row and just really hoping that the city would see the value in what we were doing in the community and believing in tennis for this area. And I think they liked everything that we had done at that point, but it was still too early on. We hadn't really established a long-term track record. They didn't know if I was going to stay in Danville and run this thing. It's just you have to really earn the trust of some of these leaders over the years, and just let them know that you're here to stay and you're going to stick to your mission. So I think after hearing no, even though it was disappointing, it was kind of gut check time if we were really committed to this or not. And I think that's when we dug in as an organization. And like I said, we just have an awesome board that just really dug in with me and just started trying to put the pieces in place that would eventually lead to a yes. So, I guess I'll touch on this last little point before I go into that. When the Parks and Rec department, the director had told us, no, we're not in a position to support tennis because, their primary reasoning for that was we don't support other sports. So why should we support tennis. We have basketball programs that are asking us for funding. We have soccer programs that are on the decline that are asking for funding. Baseball has really dropped off in our area too, and they all need funding. So that got us thinking, what really sets us apart from these other sports. I mean, it's actually a really great point. Why should they support us and help fund what we're trying to do? And I think the rebuttal, it didn't take too long for us to think about that, was, we're out in the community. We're doing things that other sports aren't doing. We're going into, low income, at risk areas and reaching kids that these other sports weren't able to do or were not doing at that time. And I think the director really, kind of agreed to that, but we just needed to beat that into their head over and over and over again. And, I still think we're doing that, and they see it. So I think that, kind of started in their heads to separate us and kind of, put us in a little bit different category and just earn their respect and their trust more, after they saw that and experienced that, and we keep reminding them of that. So, those were the first couple of years meetings, kind of the responses we were getting back from the Parks and Rec. So, I thought it'd be a good time at this point to kind of go over the lessons that we learned, and how we're approaching it. I don't know if we're, the most successful model out there for partnering with Parks and Rec, because, at this point, we're still working on some of these goals we have in that partnership. But I'm starting to see things that they really care about, and that make a difference to them, and starting to try and hone in on those areas, because I don't know, they weren't really laid out. They didn't really tell me, this golden path to follow in order to, go deeper in a collaboration with them. So I kind of had to learn it over time. And one of those things is partner when at all possible. Make yourself a part of their team, and you want to become a trusted teammate. So when they offer you things, try to take advantage of it, even if it's something that doesn't really make sense to how you operate your program. For instance, they offer for us to do our registration for our leagues and things like that on their website. They're offering to market for us and things like that. And I kind of already had all that handled, but that's a situation where the more you can kind of embed yourself with them in their infrastructure and how they operate, and driving more people to their website, that's a value add on their part. So at this point, I'm trying to start to take advantage of those opportunities, even if I can't see right off the bat, where there's an advantage for my tennis program. So yeah, and I think that kind of relays into the second bullet point there. Even if there's a little extra red tape, or even this might make people gasp, even if it's marginally profitable for a certain program, the more you can partner with them and show them that you're, willing to operate, the way that they want to offer a program to the community, and follow their protocol. I think that just adds more trust and more credibility, and it'll just help deepen that relationship in the long term. Also, safe play, I think, was critical in having our coaches safe play certified. That definitely checks their boxes as far as bringing in an outside organization to coordinate and run programs. So I think that's a huge one. We also saw some favorable, I think, feedback from Parks and Rec when we offered to help apply for a USTA facilities grant. Like I said, we had 13 public courts in this area, but many of them needed renovating and resurfacing. So just showing them that we cared about their revenue and we wanted to be good stewards of that, I think also went a long ways. So yeah, I would definitely pursue that. Also just kind of like learning about what their needs are and trying to meet them and help out how tennis in only a way that tennis can for those particular things. And as I mentioned earlier, the city had in the Parks and Rec were really focused on youth intervention. So our NJTL was a perfect match for that, and we were able to successfully partner with Parks and Rec. They were running a youth mentorship program at that time, and we were starting our first season, which is last spring. Started our first NJTL tennis and learning program. And so we were offering tennis, and this picture that you're seeing on your screen, that's a mobile STEM discovery bus. So that would come to some local tennis courts each week, and we would do a tennis program and a STEM education program. And then the city provided some mentors that would just kind of help with the SEL portion of this program. So I think that went pretty well, and we got to know some of the employees at Parks and Rec in a little bit deeper way. And I think that's, that will help us in the long run as well. I think Parks and Rec are always trying to reach seniors. So partnering with your local pickleball association is a great way to touch that segment of your community. So if, Parks and Rec, they need to reach seniors more, pickleball is a great way to do that. So anything you can offer, as far as that goes, I think will definitely add value there. As well as ACEs for Autism. It's a program we're currently working on and maybe trying to roll out next year, and future plans for the disabled community as well. So I think those are all areas that show your heart and show what you can do to add value to what Parks and Rec, needs that Parks and Rec can't meet currently. So after making the decision to serve first, then, like I said, I'm kind of hard-headed. So, it takes me a few years to finally pick up on, what Parks and Rec actually needs from us and wants us to do. And like I said, in our experience here, they didn't lay it out, just very clearly to us, how to, help serve them and how to become a part of the team. You just have to kind of read between the lines and do it with persistence. And I would say one of the things that we were able to do is meet with the director of the Parks and Rec often. So when we meet with Parks and Rec, we meet with the director, and he's the overall decision maker. So I think he's the one that eventually will bless, what initiative or whatever funding requests we have. I know that, in dealing with other institutions, organizations, if you're working with certain people that, maybe a little bit lower level in authority, you could just always be getting roadblocked or coming up against resistance. So I would just urge you all to try and meet with the decision maker, as much as possible, because they're the ones that can make it happen at the end of the day. So I think also a big lesson we learned is learn how they do business. Just learn how they like to support other organizations, or if they do, what types of organizations they like to do, just learning what their initiatives are, what their goals are, and just how tennis can add value there. It's something we've touched on earlier, but still something I keep in mind whenever I meet with Parks and Rec. I'd also noticed with our department here locally, there wasn't a lot of outside organizations that they were partnering with, but the ones that they did, I wanted to pay attention, what those organizations were and what types of programs were Parks and Rec supporting. So here they had a pretty good relationship with the local running club. So they would help put on races, 5Ks and 1 mile runs and things like that with the local running club. So I noticed that. I noticed also we have a mountain biking association in our area, and they had partnered with them to help put on some local mountain biking races. So I started noticing that our Parks and Rec, they like to partner on events, so I immediately started thinking, leagues and tournaments. Those are the types of things where Parks and Rec seems to be willing to partner and maybe offer some funding assistance, to help out in those areas. So, and then next, I think it was important. I had brought my board with me whenever I meet with the director. I think that's key. Bring a few board members with you. Just to add credibility and just have another set of ears on the conversation, because they may hear things and pick up on things that you don't. But I would definitely take a board member whenever you can. And we had some success taking one of our very business savvy board members with us. And he was able to ask questions that I wasn't even thinking about, as far as how the city does their budgeting and when they like to fund things. When do they have overages in their budget that they need to spend before creating the next year's budget, things like that. So those are things I hadn't really thought about, when requesting funds from Parks and Rec. But that turned out to be a really key, line of questioning, and just key information, because asking them at the right time for funds is pretty critical. And I didn't realize that was so important when you're dealing with a city Parks and Rec. So they have overages at sometimes during the year. So that's a good time to maybe request additional funding, or when they're preparing the budget for the next year and you want to be included in that budget, you have a program that wants to be included in that, then you have to approach that at the right time and put it in front of them at the right time. So. And lastly, I would say, it's become really critical for us. We haven't done this as of yet, but it's kind of on our on our goals for this year, is to just really get in front of city council. Whenever you're trying to get Parks and Rec to seriously partner with a tennis program, they're going to have to justify it to taxpayers, and they're going to have to justify it with city council. That is, I think, probably our biggest mountain to climb at this point. Is just getting city council awareness of what we do in the community, trying to grow their favor for our tennis community. And then I think Parks and Rec, because they know we've done a good job over the past few years, are going to be way more likely to include us in their budget for any sort of programs next year, because then they don't run across heavy scrutinization by city council. So when city council knows what you do, they know you do good work, they know the community likes what you do, they're not going to put up much of a battle when Parks and Rec has funds for a tennis program in the next year's budget. So trying to pave that path and make it easy for Parks and Rec to approve what it is you're asking for. So near the end here, thanks for bearing with me. But where is SATA and Parks and Rec today? Well, we have unlimited court access to 6 courts at GW High School. So we're able to run all of our programming there without any sort of disturbance or having to share courts really with anybody, except for the high school team, a little bit in the spring. Other than that, we have just unfettered access to courts, which is huge. Parks and Rec, as of today, has resurfaced and repaired every public court in town. So we have nice, solid quality courts that allow us to have tournaments and allow us to have leagues and allow us to have camps, so having those infrastructural pieces in place is just huge to just letting this program grow. And we have, they offer not only the tennis courts at a very low cost, if any, They're also offering us the ability to use some of their indoor gymnasium space and other spaces that they have throughout the city. We run a ping pong league in the winter, so they give us a pretty good deal in space for ping pong. And some of our elementary school tennis and after school programs that are in gymnasiums, some of the quick start stuff, they're starting to offer time for us for free to use that during the winter, which is pretty critical for keeping tennis going in the winter in this area, since we don't have indoor facilities, or indoor tennis facilities. So they are annually helping fund our leagues and some of our tournaments. So they made a financial commitment. They did it originally for 2 years, and I think we are getting ready to do another 2 or 3 year financial commitment to just help us assist with our leagues. And that touches on the next bullet point there. And one thing I would say about that too, when you're approaching, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but when you're approaching Parks and Rec, for funding, especially for leagues and tournaments, I would come prepared with how many city residents you are reaching and how many city residents are participating in your program. We're a relatively small city, so we have lots of county participation level as well from the Pennsylvania County. And they really like to know how many of your participants are city residents and city taxpayers, because they're not as interested in helping the county. They want to leave that for the county Parks and Rec. So having that data, and having your participants and having that segmented and broken out, and how many of them are city residents, I think is key. They really wanted that whenever we were asking them for funds. So coming prepared for that, I think would definitely help you out. And then as far as our relationship today with Parks and Rec, they're starting. It's been a slow process. We've been at this 5 years now, but it's it's been consistent and it's been growing. So we're hopeful that it's going to turn into maybe providing a director of tennis position, or just in some major way helping stabilize the tennis program, with funding and cost assistance. And we seem to be on that path. They're always helping us as far as windscreens at tennis courts, or providing a porta-john at the tennis courts, for restroom use or things like that. So, just a lot of things that just make life easier. So, I think we're on that path, by doing the things, that we talked about earlier on in this presentation. So that's about all I got. So if there's any questions or anything, I'd be glad to field those.
Thank you, Rusty, for the presentation. And if anyone in the chat would like to ask Rusty anything right now, we do have some time. Feel free to put it in either the chat or the Q&A section. And we'll do our best to answer those questions. I had some on my end, but let's start with one from the audience, from Scott. He was asking, how does Parks and Rec view the work that you're doing in schools? Are they an active partner in bringing sports to schools?
Okay. All right. Can I see that question anywhere, or is that just
yeah? Can you see in the Q&A section? You see it on the bottom?
Oh, the Q&A. Yeah, I was looking in the chat. Okay. How does Parks and Rec view the work you are doing in schools? Yeah, so that's I think that's been a huge part of their willingness to listen to us and open their doors, a bit to us. Is just we were one of the few organizations that have been able to get into our public schools. Traditionally, the public schools in this area have not allowed outside organizations to come in and work with their youth. They did not offer after school programs, but tennis really made that happen. We cracked the door and got in there, and the kids loved tennis, and the feedback was very favorable. And we have so many teachers still telling us, kids get so excited when it's Tennis Tuesday or Tennis Wednesday or whatever. And we like to think that kids go to school looking forward to that, and it helps keep them in school, you know. And I think that Parks and Rec was amazed that we were able to do that. Number one, because they had been trying to get into schools for years and years and weren't able to do it. And the fact that we were able to do it and we're having great success with it, honestly, I think that's help build this relationship as much as anything. So
Great. And yeah, and I was want to chime in just real quick on my end, just from my experience. It does kind of vary depending on the area. There are some parks and rec that are much more involved with their school space. Some are more disconnected. But I think long term, as everything you said, it's worthwhile to pursue that relationship with the parks and recs because they provide so much more benefits that it makes sense to work with them. And Rusty, I was going to ask you just if you can clarify when you run programs with Parks and Recs, do they charge you only for a court use at most, or do they charge for like a percentage of your fees, or what's that relationship like?
Yeah, as of right now, they've let us use the tennis courts for free since we began. The tennis courts were not being used at all. They were a ghost town, and they were just sitting there and deteriorating, and had been for years and years. So Parks and Rec were happy that somebody had come in and we're starting to get the courts in use and providing programming. So it was just kind of a wash on their end. So they said if the program gets big, and there's community members complaining because they can't use courts because of your programming, at that point we'll look at maybe a small fee or something to rent and reserve the courts. And we haven't gotten there yet. But it's kind of heading in that direction. When we drive past the course now, there's almost always people out there playing. So maybe, in the future, there will be, some sort of small fee that we pay Parks and Rec for utilization of the courts.
Okay. Well, I guess that's a good problem. I know I have like a lot of other parks and recs I work with. I'm in the kind of the DC area where the tennis courts are pretty popular, more or less.
Right.
And yeah, I'd say most relationship with parks and recs, they do have some type of fee associated. It's usually either that you rent out the course or they get a percentage of whatever you charge.
Right.
Those are kind of curious, but that's a good deal. They're not doing that right now. You get a lot of benefits that way for sure.
That's right.
And another question I had for you is, besides offering a tennis director role, if you had a wish list of what else that Parks and Recs can do more for you, what would be some of the other things that you would like them to do?
I think office space, would be nice. Maybe that's a big ask, but I don't think it really is with our Parks and Rec. They have plenty of space and we work together a lot at this point. So I think, maybe kind of just I don't know, or maybe even a regular meeting with Parks and Rec when they're doing their fall and spring offerings, kind of being a part of that and just feeling a little more a part of the team. And I think they would welcome that. I just haven't really pursued that, with them because we've been pretty busy on our own. But I think, as I was saying in the presentation, I need to start, doing a little bit more with trying to embed myself with how they operate. And I think they would actually appreciate that more. So yeah, I think that's something I can do. Office space, being a part of their meetings. Just a couple of capital expenditures at the courts, we need some things at our local course, like a shed to put balls and things like that. So, a couple of, small capital expenditures at the tennis courts. And I think maybe more of a planned marketing strategy with them, maybe more, because I do my things, a little bit last minute, maybe a month or two before programs are actually rolled out, is when I, do all the planning for them. They do things so far in advance, they do things 6 months, 9 months in advance. So I think kind of getting on their schedule with the things that I know I'm going to offer annually, or seasonally, and at least getting them what they need in order to roll it out in their marketing channels, with the rest of their offerings. I think, just kind of some organizational and administrative, things there.
Right, and I was going to say that's pretty typical of other parks and recs. They usually request information like many months in advance, and like the summer camps and like 6 months in advance or something like that. So no, that's good to kind of be aware for anyone else in the audience, like just to know that's like when you work on parks and recs, you have to deal with some administrative hurdles with them, especially with the initial onboarding process, getting through their proposals and whatnot. But that's something that in the future, if anyone else need help with that, I can help support that part of the process. I can help with reviewing your agreements and whatnot, provide some best, just some ideas for how to make it better. So, but yeah, I think Reza, one concepts of time, but you did a great job presenting on your experience with working with Parks and Recs, and gave a lot of great ideas and just innovative ways to kind of think outside the box to make things happen. So yeah, great, good job, Rusty, for doing all you're doing to grow in tennis in the area. I'm sure everyone appreciates it.
Thanks, Alex. We're not where exactly we want to be yet, but I feel like we're on our way. So hopefully some of these things can help. So
yeah, absolutely. All right. So with that said, we'll go ahead and end the meeting. And yeah, I'll be in touch regarding next month's webinar. But otherwise, have a good rest of your day. Thanks, Rusty. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alex. Bye-bye.
Bye all.